Hello all, and welcome to another episode of the Worldy podcast. My name is Crystal, and I will be the host of today's episode. I have here with me Brandon and Aaron, and today we will be sharing and discussing snippets from a call that Brandon and Aaron had with Dave Cobban, founder of Nike Adventure Club, which was a shoe subscription business for kids and allowed parents to swap out their kids' old sneakers for new ones. It was launched in 2019, but was discontinued in 2020 for a host of reasons. Brandon and Aaron sat with Dave to talk about his journey running a subscription-based shoe business. A lot of insightful things were shared, some of which I will discuss with Brandon and Aaron on this episode of the podcast to give you all a glimpse into how the founders of Worldy are thinking about their own business given their conversation with Dave. Hey Brandon, hey Aaron, how are you both doing today?
I'm doing well.
Not too bad.
Okay, so today we will be talking about your conversation with Dave Cobban. And the first snippet of the conversation we will focus on is when he talked about how he pivoted from a subscription-based business for runners to what Nike Adventure Club eventually became, which was a shoe business that targeted kids.
Exactly. Yeah. So basically the backstory was I think it was 2014, and Mark Parker, the CEO of Nike at the time, had said to his leadership team, hey guys, look, we're going to be a $50 billion company in the next few years, $50 billion revenue. But how do we become a $100 billion company? And so it was, and he set that sort of challenge around every year. Nike's leadership team do what they call SPKO, which is strategic planning kickoff. And they basically do a sort of big 5-year, 10-year look into the future and sort of go, are we heading in the right direction? Where do we want to go? That kind of thing. So Mark had set this kind of challenge to his team, sort of saying, hey, what does it look like to be a $100 billion company? Now, when you know that Nike makes 1 billion pairs of shoes a year, like an eighth of the population of the entire globe, you get to the understanding that probably a peak sneaker. So the idea of, say, doubling the amount of sneakers they sell is not really realistic. So one of the ideas that my boss, Hannah Jones, she was the VP of Corporate Responsibility and Sustainability. So she sits on that leadership team. And we went back with this kind of idea of, well, why don't we not sell product, but actually provide services where the product itself isn't necessarily owned by the consumer. So I came back with my team and sort of pitched this idea of a running subscription. So instead of owning a running shoe, you basically lease it from Nike and you run your 250, 300 miles in it. And then you'd bring it back and we'd recycle it, and then you get a new shoe and you on the cycle would kind of go. And it was like linked to all kinds of cool stuff around, being able to look at the tread patterns on the shoe to be able to sort of see whether the runner, was pronating in a certain way or that kind of thing. And it was really well received. When it was pitched to the leadership team, they were like, "Oh my God, love it! We got to do this thing." So off I went and started to do actual sort of consumer interviews and all this kind of stuff. And what we kind of found was that the runners liked it. They were like, "Oh, this is such a cool idea." But runners who were parents were like, "Oh my God, would be amazing for my kids." Because my kids, they trash shoes like every 3 months. It's like they just, they're running around, trash them or wear out of them or grow out of them. So there was a lot of factors that meant obsolescence of a kid's shoe was even more acute than, say, a runner's shoe. Because a lot of time what we found with runners was that they'll run for, say, 250 or 300 miles in a certain shoe, and then they'll retire it to be the gardening shoe, so which is actually quite sustainable in that way. So they use it for a lot longer. So with that knowledge, we kind of pivoted to this idea of doing a kids subscription. And that was where it really took off, because when we interviewed parents of kids and we go to visit them in homes and stuff like that, we one of the classic questions I would ask them was like, "Hey, can I look in your closet, like in your garage?" And you'd open the closet and like all these old stinky kids' shoes would fall out, they'd be really embarrassed, and they'd be go, "Oh, I'm sorry, I need to go to Goodwill," but it's just like, I can't, I haven't got the time. Anyway, when we were like, we got something here, something that'll ease the guilt of them sort of collecting all these old shoes, and it'll solve the hassle of having to go to the store with a kid. Because like what they were saying to us as well is like, oh, every time we go to the store, the kid wants the LeBron Soldier X or whatever, and that's like $150, and I don't want to get it. But then they have a tantrum because they don't get this LeBron Soldier X, and I just want them to have the kind of $60 basketball shoe from Nike or whatever. So we learned a ton from just going and doing like ethnography, speaking to people, speaking to parents about it, and that's how it all began. So
Worldy kind of had a similar pivot, which you guys have talked about a bit in the previous episode that we shot. So can you briefly just share how you pivoted and why it was important that you were flexible with your business idea? I can throw it to Brandon. You can go first.
Sure. So I guess perhaps the biggest reason that we ended up pivoting was the information that we were getting back from consumers via this like customer discovery program. And we kind of alluded to it in episode 0. So we talked to a lot of like former competitive athletes and really just tried to get an idea about their like needs and expectations regarding like soccer cleats. And then as we got, I guess, to know them and to know like some of their pain points, we kind of discovered that many of them had a lot of loyalties to the cleat brands that they wore when they were playing competitively. And so it was going to be kind of difficult when we think about like customer acquisition costs to kind of get those former competitive athletes over to a new cleat. And then another big thing that we kind of noted was that these players there was not a lot of churn. They weren't going through cleats very often because they weren't playing very often. And their feet weren't growing as well. And so we weren't in a situation where they were looking for new cleats or actively looking for new cleats all the time. And so we kind of fell into the kids market simply by talking to some of these former competitive athletes who were parents, and started kind of discussing some of the pain points in the process of purchasing just shoes in general for their kids. And that kind of led us to the pivot. And so, I don't know, Aaron can maybe elaborate just a little bit more, but that was really one of the initial things that kind of led us this way.
Yeah, just to add on that, I think from a business perspective, there are a few things that made us think about a pivot and why, basically business reasons that we use to kind of pivot from that initial segment to the kids segment. The first one is that, and I think Brandon alluded to this already, but the market size for former competitive athletes just wasn't that big. So it's already a super competitive space. There's Nike's playing in that space, Adidas, Puma, all these brands. So it's crowded and it's not that big. So it felt like maybe too niche of a product. And the kids market is not so niche. It's big. Kids' feet are growing a lot. So they're going through shoes, maybe 2 to 3 shoes per year, just in terms of like an athletic context. So that's one of the reasons. Another reason was it's just a little bit easier to get people to switch, because when you're a former competitive athlete, you're pretty set in your ways in terms of the brands you like, what you think works and what doesn't. So it's really hard to get people to try a new brand. And even if you do get them to try a new brand, they're maybe only buying your shoe like once or twice in their entire lifetime before maybe they retire or go back to whatever they were wearing before. Whereas for kids, we feel like we can get them if we sell the first shoe to them at, let's say, 4 years old, we can maybe sell 5 to 10 pairs of shoes to them over the course of their childhood, maybe even more. So that's just another reason. So, I mean, it made sense from just in terms of what we were hearing from consumers, like Brandon said, and then also just in terms of just strictly from a business case perspective, the kids market makes a little bit more sense to go after than that initial segment of former competitive athletes.
Yeah, that's interesting. So this reminds me of something else that Dave talks about, which is identifying the problem that you're trying to solve. I wanted to ask specifically to hear you guys talk about what is the problem that you're trying to solve with your Worldy product.
So Brandon, you want to go first and say what you think the biggest problem is? Because I think I might say something different than you.
So I'm gonna hedge my bets, and I'm gonna name a few problems that I think we hope to address. Not all of them, just some of the ones that we felt like were were the biggest ones. And I guess the first one we encountered was fit, not to be confused with size. So as parents shop for shoes for their kids, a lot of times they run across the problem of finding the shoe that kind of fits their kid's foot. And we felt that we could be able to address that by having several different like toe box sizes. So like if we can have several different like widths when it comes to like the toe box, that could help with the fit a little bit more, especially when shopping online. So parents not having a chance to like have their kid actually try it on before purchasing it, allowing something or allowing other options gives them an opportunity to be a little bit more confident when they make these purchases online. And then one of the other problems that we kind of like recognized was that these athletic shoes weren't being specifically made for kids. We kept hearing as we talked to kind of industry partners and people who were in the industry for a while, shoe industry that is, that there was a mantra called shrink it and pink it, where they were just shrinking down usually adult male shoes so that kids would be able to fit into them, or pinking it, so changing the colorway so that it fit more with a female palate. And so the shoes weren't necessarily being made for kids developing feet. Instead, they were just using smaller adult sizes. And we felt we could do better. We could make shoes that were specifically made for kids with their development in mind. And that would address one of the more, I guess, prominent issues when it comes to kids' athletic footwear.
Yeah, so I think in terms of all the surveys we ran, the people we talked to, the research we've done, we've seen that kind of consistently across the board, size and fit is the biggest pain point for parents, especially if you're buying shoes online, because sizing is pretty inconsistent across brands. And even within a brand, the sizing can be different between different types of shoes or models of shoe. So that's something that's a pretty big barrier for parents to buy a brand that they're not aware of, because they don't know, is this shoe actually going to fit my kid's foot? Is it going to be comfortable? Things like that. So sizing and fit, those are two things that we think are pretty important and things that we're focusing on. So we've talked about potentially incorporating foot scanning into our website or our app so that parents can scan their kid's foot. They can see basically what size is going to be the best fit. And then also based on their kid's unique foot shape, is our shoe actually going to be comfortable for them or not? And essentially telling them ahead of time, you should wear this size, and it's going to be on a scale of 0 to 100, it'll fit your kid like 75% of the way or 85% of the way. And if you're below, let's say like 70, then you probably just shouldn't buy it because it's not going to be too comfortable. And that's potentially a way to give parents a little bit more confidence that our shoes are actually going to fit their kid. Basically reduce returns as well, because returns are super expensive. It's also pretty unsustainable. A lot of carbon emissions in e-commerce are just due to return. So there's basically, if we're able to get that right in terms of foot scanning, or maybe something more rudimentary, just like having a sizing guide where you print out you print something out, you have your kid put their foot on it, make a couple marks, you give that to us, and then we'll figure out what the size is. We think that's one way that basically we could just make parents' lives a lot easier. The other thing is, if you have, because we've talked about this shoe that is multi-purpose, multi-use, multi-sport. So essentially combining a lot of shoes into one. If you do that, essentially like the price that you're paying for shoes is lower, which we've heard a lot of parents say that kid shoes are expensive, and it starts to add up because their feet grow so quickly and they're doing so many different activities that if you're buying shoes for every different activity, it's just that the cost can start to you can start to rack up like a lot of money in expenses. The other thing we've heard is that it's just a hassle to buy all these different shoes, to be switching shoes for your kid, to know what to do with them when you're done with them, all that kind of stuff. So we think there's a lot of value in also just having one shoe for all these different activities and not having to worry about buying all these different shoes and then switching your kids' shoes for all the different activities that they're doing or throughout the day. Take them to school, put them in one pair of shoes, take them home, take them to soccer practice, put on another pair of shoes. So we think that's just another way to make parents' lives a little bit easier.
Yeah, so that's interesting. You kind of talked a lot about the concerns that parents have with buying shoes for their kids. Brandon talked about fit, you talked about, just the cost and other things. So let's switch gears a little bit and listen to a snippet of the conversation you had with Dave about the recruit the mom, retain the kid strategy.
Yeah, Dominique, who headed up our retention, she used to have this brilliant phrase, which is we recruit the mom, but we retain the kid. So mom was the one that, we had to sell essentially. And what was interesting about it, we would often find is like mom would see the ad on Facebook, but she might click on it, but we'd see this like lag between them converting. And it was really frustrating because of course you want to kind of, oh my God, do they not like it or whatever? But what was happening is they might speak to their partner and I'd be like, there'd be a bit of debate about it, kind of thing. And then, of course, they might have to be with the kid and they have to measure the kid's shoe size. So if the kid's at school, there's a lag between all that sort of happening. So we found generally that they needed 9 touch points. The mom generally would need 9 touch points before actually converting. I know. It's like, and so retargeting became our friend. So, once you've acquired them, they come to the site. Ideally, they put their email address in and then we can retarget them through email. But then if not, we'd also then retarget them using UTMs, basically then they, like we always do when we go on Instagram, you click on an ad. Next thing you know, you get that ad about 500 times until you convert or whatever. So similar sort of thing for us.
Dave talked a little bit about this whole recruit the mom, retain the kid strategy, which I thought was really interesting. But I want to hear your thoughts on that. Is that something that Roddy might be interested in? Is that something you all are thinking about? Like, how are you thinking about attracting the parents? Because obviously parents have a lot of concern about kids' shoes. You talked about that, Aaron and Brandon, in your previous comment. So just tell me what you're thinking about in terms of that strategy that Dave talks about.
I think it basically ties into what we were just talking about. So if you want to recruit the parent, you have to talk to them in ways, basically like, how is this product going to make your life easier? Because I think that's what a lot of parents care about. So are you going to save them money? Are you going to allow them to buy fewer pairs of shoes? I think those are the 2 main ones. And then also just talking about if you're buying this for your kid, like, why is it better for your kid? So I think all those kinds of things are pretty important just to get parents, because parents are the ones that are actually doing the shopping and that are surfing the web looking for shoes. I don't really think there's too many 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 7, 8, whatever it is, surfing the web, finding shoes. And I mean, maybe kids are just different from how they were when I was growing up, but I don't think many kids are doing that. I think more or less it's the parents finding shoes and then showing them to their kids, seeing what they think. So I think you have to attract the parent first, get their attention, let them know how you're going to make their lives easier. And then obviously the design has to look good enough that the kid actually wants it and wants to wear it. And then once the parent buys the shoe, you want to have the unboxing experience, the product experience be such that the kid wants to continue to wear that shoe. And we've talked about a few things, and I know Dave mentioned a few things in the conversation about maybe you do collectibles, maybe you have coloring books, maybe you customize the packaging to the kid, like have their name on it, things like that, just to make them excited about wearing the product and looking forward to buying the product again. So I think it's important to think about how you attract the parent, attract the kid, and then also retain the parent and retain the kid.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. It's definitely a 2-pronged approach, especially when you're looking at like the design element. You're trying to build a shoe that's going to be attractive and appealing to a kid, while at the same time it's going to make sure that the parent is comfortable and confident in the product. And so you're constantly trying to balance the two. So it's not something that you're just like weighing heavily on one side or the other, because if you're out of balance, then the product itself will fail. So that's something that we considered. We continue to try to get feedback on the product through our different channels to make sure that we're meeting both needs, because this is two factions in our target audience, and we want to make sure that we're meeting both needs. And then Aaron kind of mentioned the unboxing experience. That's another thing that we really want to like hit on and make sure we're doing right, and making sure that the product is something that like the kid anticipates, that that's something that they really desire to get. So I know we may touch on that a little bit later, but I think those are all some big things.
The kid, what we found was the unboxing experience was awesome. That was a really good moment for the kids. The kids like, oh wow, that's super exciting. Wow, that's really cool. But then the idea that we then started to add things to the box like stickers, and then eventually the adventure guides and that kind of stuff. Because what we wanted to do is give the kids reason to kind of play with us for the 3 months that they've got the shoe before they order the next one. And then what we found, mums saying to us things like, oh, I was going to cancel, but my kids went mental when I said I was going to cancel because they couldn't wait to get the next box and that kind of thing. So that was what I was sort of, okay, if we can continue to engage the kid, then we'll be able to, keep our retention up high. And churn, by the way, was really good. I mean, it was less than 6%. So it was we had a really good retention rate, almost comparable to like Netflix, so which for a product as a service is pretty amazing. So it's cool. The physical things that they got, was what the kid. So the kid would so they had like a journal that would come. So because the kids that we were talking to were like the main audience was like 2 to 8. Mm-hmm. So a lot of parents were not giving them phones at this stage, kind of thing. And they'd have there's a sticker pack that came with it, like stickers. And then they had like a poster they could put up on their wall. So it was like play first, nap never, go fast, get messy, buddy up, kind of thing. Yeah. So then they would have things to do, like, then they would complete this. And then the next time they order, they get another one that's totally different. So every quarter we redesign them. So there was like a collectibles kind of aspect to it, kind of thing. So a little bit similar to what Jason was doing with Super Heroic, is this idea of, giving the kids some sort of rewards that are different from the mom, so that there's kind of a special, it's like their club. They're the member of the club, sort of thing. And the parent is like the administrator.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit more. I know, Brandon, you shared a story about how you're walking in the park or somewhere with your daughter, and this kid sees the prototype of the shoe on your daughter and is so excited and is asking his dad or something about whether he could get the shoe, and I thought that was a great story because the shoe itself was marketing for you guys. You guys didn't do anything else but have your daughter wear the shoe and the kids were getting excited. Is that part of your way of recruiting the child or retaining the child? Like, is the shoe itself a marketing opportunity? Like, and in addition to that, are there other things? And I know you talked about the unboxing experience, but how are you thinking of getting the kid excited? Like,
yeah, for sure. And to that story, it's actually a little bit different in terms of like the facts. So like we had just gotten this sample. Aaron and I did go out into, like, we were still at University of Chicago at the time. And so we went to Southfield, which is like one of the intramural fields on University of Chicago's campus. And we have one shoe, really. It's just like one size, or one side of the pair. So we have, like, I think the right shoe. And so we had my daughter running around on the turf and kind of taking some pictures of her. And then we were going to go across campus, I think closer to like Medici, and take some more pictures at a playground. And so we're passing through the University of Chicago Lab School, their playground, and there's a bunch of kids out there playing. I'm actually holding the shoes. I'm holding this one little kid's shoe. And as I'm walking by this dad and his son, the kid kind of like, hey, Dad, what kind of shoe is that? What kind of shoe is he holding? That's pretty cool. And then his dad kind of looks at it and like, oh, I don't know. And I just kind of kept walking. I didn't even like respond to it. But later on, I kind of text Aaron and say like, hey man, we already had like some head turns with the product, and this is just kind of like day one with the sample. So I think that's definitely something that we are really like, focusing on right now, making sure that the design is not only attractive to parents, but also to kids. We're looking at several different colorways. So we're working with our designer right now and trying to go over and see what resonates, like what pattern schema kind of like really resonates with kids from like multiple different colors and like multiple different like pictorial designs on the shoe. Whether it's like, I think we have like a jungle kind of concept that we're going to try to test out in the next few weeks or whatever. So all that kind of stuff is something that we anticipate testing here in the coming days. And as far as like the unboxing experience goes, and like what we were considering, we've looked at like different caricatures, like some stickers or some collectibles or even other things. We've looked at companies like Nike Adventure Club, what they contained in their boxes, or even another company, Super Heroic, and some things that they had. So we're still trying to lay out like exactly what we want to do, but we're kind of drawing some inspiration from some brands who kind of came before us. I don't know if Aaron has anything.
No, I think Brandon basically said everything. I don't think I can really add anything. I think he summed it up perfectly.
Okay, great. Well, we're going to listen to a snippet of the conversation with Dave, where he was talking about how Nike Adventure Club was thinking about kids who, after they get to the age of 10, typically want more agency with choosing and purchasing their own sneakers.
About 87% of our audience were moms and a little bit were dads. Most were using mobile to do access it. We were sort of still a little bit heavy on the boys and on the girls. It was all over the country, and we were 40% rural, 40% suburban, 20% urban, which is very different from Nike's core audience, which is the other way around. It's like 80% urban, 20% rural. Anyway, so that's sort of just a little bit of stats and how it went from sort of toddler from 2 years old. But after about 10, it really started to drop off because kids at that point want more agency. They want to choose their own shoe and they want a kind of cooler shoe and that kind of thing.
So following that snippet of the conversation, how are you guys thinking of capturing the entire kids market? Clearly, there are segments in the market where the younger kids heavily rely on their parents to choose the shoes that they wear. But then as kids get older, they want more independence in those choices.
We're definitely more focused on the younger portion of the market. So kids around 5 to 10. We think that's going to be really our core target segment because we've talked to a lot of parents. We've talked to a lot of people who were athletes when they were younger. And essentially what they say is until they're around 12 or 13 years old, really their parents were the ones that were making the shoe purchase decisions. And then when they got basically closer to high school and they got a little bit more competitive with their sports, they cared a lot more about what they were wearing. They wanted to wear the same thing as professionals. They wanted to wear what their friends were wearing. They cared about status, all these kinds of things. So we feel like just naturally, we're probably going to lose a lot of customers as customers are kind of going to age out of our product. And that's something that we're okay with because we really want to target and serve this market of kids who are just getting into sports because we feel like that's a unique segment. And a lot of big shoe companies don't really cater to that market. A lot of shoe companies do cater to the market that's a little bit older than that, like, young teenagers, high schoolers, things like that. So we feel like really where we can be differentiated is with people who are a little bit younger. So we have thought about it. I mean, it would be great to be able to sell to people, from the age of basically from birth until 18, but just based on what we want our brand to stand for, basically what we want the differentiating factors to be, it just makes more sense to go after kids around 5 to 10. And we feel pretty confident that we can give them a better solution than what's already on the market.
Yeah, no, I certainly agree with that. We do expect like an age out, and especially as we think about that whole worldy experience that we kind of just discussed when it comes to like the unboxing and including maybe stickers or collectibles. that's going to be premised around like a certain age demographic. After a while, you're probably not going to be so excited about getting a box full of stickers or whatever it might be that we like decide to include in the unboxing experience. So there's an expectation that, you know, we're going to lose a consumer once they hit a certain age. And similar to like what kind of Aaron was saying, like this is something that like a company like IKEA kind of expects, and they are anticipating that a big segment of their consumer base is going to age out of their product, especially as their financial situation changes. And that's not something that they're fighting against. Instead, they're making sure that the experience for their consumers are such that these maybe some of the their kids or friends or whoever will decide to choose that particular product because they had such a positive experience with it when they fit into that target audience. For this, you know, in the same way, that's kind of how we anticipate the worldy experience being, so that these kid consumers now kind of grow up and their kids end up wearing our products.
We're going to switch gears a little bit. So just like Worldy, Nike Adventure Club was also targeting kids around the same age range that you are focused on. And they had a subscription-based model. So, you know, Aaron had talked a little bit about sustainability, and I know Worldy is really focused on that. And what Nike Adventure Club was doing was that they were, you know, collecting the shoes that the kids had aged out of, and then resupplying the kids who had subscribed to their business or, you know, to the subscriptions that they had with new shoes. Is Worldy thinking about having a similar subscription-based model? But before we go into that, let's listen to this snippet.
Well, it was a question that the Nike team asked us every time we presented, was like, what about subscription fatigue? What about, you know, do people really want subscriptions? And I mean, the way I kind of think about it is, there is no doubt, right, that if you're going to launch a subscription service, it has to meet a true need. You know, it's like, it's got to be a really compelling, meaningful need. You know, you remember those, there was a ton of like beauty boxes and like a ton of like those kind of, you know, you pay whatever it is, $20 a month, and a box would arrive and it would be some makeup in it or food in it or whatever it was. Those are all gone now. I mean, there's hardly any of those left. And that was like really, and a lot of the subscription fatigue you read about in the paper was people remembering those and kind of going, they were just worthless, you know, that kind of thing. But if you think about, say, Chewy, you know, or BarkBox, another one, like the dog chews and the dog toys that you kind of get. It's like, I mean, we got a dog, she chews through the hell out of her toys, you know, and every month we need new toys. So it works really well for us, you know, and it's like, I don't know, it's not even that expensive. And that was actually another really interesting thing, is about the price point of we've got such a funny story here. So basically, when we first started out, we had $20 a month was the price point, and we'd send out an ad and it would have, you know, kids rec shoes, you know, grow fast, and moms would see the ad on Facebook and they'd type in their husband's name or their partner's name and go, hey, what do you think about this, you know, Jimmy or whatever. And Jimmy would reply back going, yeah, actually, and it's just a dub. And we'd be like, what are they talking about? And we see it all the time. And then we sort of pilled someone up and they went, yeah, well, a dub is a $20 bag of weed. And so we were like, it's like, it's just a dub, as in I'm spending $20 on a bag of weed. We might as well spend $20 on our kids' shoes or whatever. And it was like, but it was a really great insight, because it was like, it's low enough that you don't think, it's like a gym membership of $50 a month is like, if you're not going, you're like, that's expensive, you know. So having the right price point is good. And so it's similar for us with the Chewy subscription. Is like, I don't even know, it's like, you know, whatever it is, $15 a month, but it's the dog foods arrives, you know, and that kind of thing. And so those sort of things we'll never get rid of, right? And so that's what the secret is, how compelling it is for the audience, you know. And then it can work. So, but that's it. But otherwise, it'll die, you know.
So I was asking about whether Worldy is thinking about a subscription-based business like Nike Adventure Club was. And in answering that question, can you also kind of talk about whether subscription fatigue was part of the reasons part of your thought process in deciding what kind of business model you were going to choose when it came to Aldi?
Yeah, I guess I'll give a first swing at it. So it definitely is something that we initially thought about, having a subscription model, maybe something more in line with like a traditional subscription model. We use that as a test for our customer discovery process, and kind of got like a visceral reaction from people when it came to like subscription services or subscription products, because it feels a bit predatory, because you kind of get this subscription service or subscription product, and they keep charging you every month, or whatever the frequency is, and there's maybe or maybe not like a need for that particular thing that often. And so we started to like really think about it differently. And so if we do test the subscription model waters, it'll definitely be down the road, but it wouldn't look like the traditional subscription model, so that consumers wouldn't be signing up to receive any product or be compelled to pay any like recurring fee. Instead, the premise would be like providing some kind of like service that takes away a particular pain point. In this situation, it would be like shopping for kids growing feet. Like we would want to like create some type of like service and product that would help alleviate that pain point. And Aaron kind of like talked about it a little bit earlier, in terms of like the foot scanning. This would be a way to like kind of predict foot growth. And so we'd be able to provide recommendations to parents as we anticipate or estimate foot growth. And that way the parent could know that like, all right, it's time for a new shoe. And it would be a very easy process of returning an old shoe and getting a new shoe. So that's kind of how we've approached, I guess, subscription model. And I guess, Aaron, you can talk a little bit about that or subscription fatigue.
Yeah, we talked to a lot of people about subscriptions, and a lot of people don't like them. And there's really only 3 or 4 subscriptions that people mentioned that they actually like. And it was kind of like streaming services, music streaming, or movie, TV streaming. So like Spotify, Netflix, things like that. And then beyond that, we really didn't hear too many subscription services that people actually liked. Not a lot of people were interested in subscriptions for products. And essentially what we heard is, if you have a subscription, so if someone is looking at their credit card statement and they see a charge for a subscription, they want to make sure that every month that shows up on their credit card statement, that they actually get some value from that subscription. And if you have a shoe subscription service and you're not adding anything beyond just the shoe, it's kind of like maybe 3 times a year, you're going to actually get a new shoe and be like, okay, I actually got value for that subscription. But for the other 9 or 10 months, you're looking at the credit card statement and you're saying, was it really worth it to pay $20 for this subscription because I didn't get a new pair of shoes this month? So I think if we were to go to more of a subscription model, we would have to add something beyond just shoes. So adding, either relieving a pain point like Brandon was mentioning, or kind of adding some other value to the parent or the kid. So that's something we have to consider. But I think just initially, we don't want to go with the subscription just because it's pretty hard to get people to sign up for a subscription if they've never heard of your product before and if they're not familiar with it. So, we want to establish a little bit of a brand before we consider going to more of a subscription model.
It's interesting that you talk about establishing a brand before kind of switching gears into a subscription model, because people will rather prefer to subscribe to a brand that they know. Well, Dave was clearly backed by a pretty big brand, and that's something we haven't talked about, but Nike Adventure Club, obviously Nike is in the name, right? It was backed by Nike. And so let's listen to a snippet of Dave talking about how important that backing was for Nike Adventure Club and kind of launching the business.
The power of the brand. When we first launched, we were EasyKicks, and even though we had Nike shoes, there was no Nike branding at all, and it was a real struggle because people were like, are you for real? And so when we realized that, we added the with Nike, and then on the website we said, so it's EasyKicks with Nike, and we said, oh, Nike is our official supplier. And that changed everything, because then people were like, oh, okay, Nike's back in this, it's going to be trustworthy. It's really cool. And no doubt about it that the shoes themselves, they're getting Nikes was a huge part of the deal, because kids, so many kids out there, it was really surprising to me how powerful the brand was. Kids want to be wearing Nikes because they see their, older brother and older sister, and see, switch on the TV and they see all the athletic heroes wearing Nikes. So it's very powerful. It's very hard to start a new brand of footwear. I mean, Jason found that with Super Heroic. It's super hard.
Unlike Nike Adventure Club, clearly Waldy doesn't have any big brand that's backing you guys. Do you see that as an obstacle in launching a business? Or are you just excited to start something from scratch and see where that goes on its own without any help?
I mean, yeah, that's something that people bring up a lot. And I think it's definitely difficult because we don't have the same financial resources as a company that's backed by a Nike or an Adidas. And also, brand recognition, you just have to build that from the ground up. But I almost think it's also a positive as well, because we have to really focus on adding value for our target segment. People are not going to just buy our product because it's worldy, because they've never heard of that before. Whereas with a bigger brand, maybe they'll buy something just because it has the brand name on it, even if they're not positive that it's adding any value. I think the other thing is that we're really focusing on this one target segment. So kids just getting into sports and also supporting their parents. And these bigger brands, they have to focus on all these different segments. They have to balance the needs of different customers. So I think that can affect the way you cater to any one segment, because you have to think about the business as a whole too. So I think that's also kind of a benefit for us, because we can just focus on catering to the needs of this one segment. And, if we say something like a lot of kids' shoes are just shrunken down versions of men's shoes, that's not really something that a bigger company can say, because sure, that would make the, I guess they would increase sales for kids' shoes that way, but then they would lose a little bit of credibility, because people would be asking, well, why were you doing that if you could just spend a little bit more money and design them specifically for kids' shoes? So I think those are a couple of things that make it almost a benefit to not being backed by a big company. And then also just, we want to bring something fresh to the industry. We think that the segment that we're trying to target is underserved, and looking at things with a fresh pair of eyes, I think, is going to be good for us. Then hopefully we can bring something innovative to the footwear industry and some products that are not currently offered.
Yep. I know on its face, this does look like a bit of an obstacle, not having some kind of big parent company backing us. But I'm with Aaron. This is probably one of our principal advantages, because along with all the other things that he kind of mentioned, it also gives us an opportunity, like this is probably overused a bit, but like it's a clean slate. It's a white canvas. We're able to kind of build our own core values and create a brand and the image that we feel kind of resonates with our target consumer and resonates with ourselves. And I think that's important. That builds credibility without having to like rely on something that the parent company has, or some kind of principles that Nike has. You can kind of like deviate from that and be able to create something on your own. And I think that's really big. That's really key, especially in this day and age where the consumer is a bit more conscious about like the environmental impacts of their consumption. So being able to address that right off the bat, I think that's huge for us.
Yeah, no, this has been a really great conversation, and unfortunately, all good things do have to come to an end. But before we do that, Dave shared some parting advice with you guys in your conversation with him, and so let's listen to what he had to say.
I guess the first recommendation was don't design a new shoe. Use a silhouette that already exists, because you're smashing together two incredibly high effort, because you got building a subscription, really, amazingly hard work required, but awesome fun and such a lot of interesting things that you learn on the way. And then you got building a new shoe, which is incredibly hard. I do tons of advice stuff with new startups trying to do shoes, and it's just such a lot of just the whole thing around lasts and material supply and all that kind of stuff is really hardcore. So my advice is to probably stick with build a new business, but don't build a new product is what I would, or, you can try the other way around. But I building a new business, you can go to, and actually as a startup, I would go to, is it Native? There's a brand called Native, which is like it's like mini Crocs. Hold on, let me just type it in. Is it Native?
I think so. I have heard of that brand.
Yeah, here you go. Native shoes. Yeah. It's such a cute little Crocsy shoe. Now they should totally do the subscription. So I would go to them and go, hey, look, we're a college startup to can we borrow a few shoes off you, and see if you can get 50 customers to start a subscription with a silhouette, like that sort of thing. And see if you get traction around that sort of thing, and then you earn your way into, eventually once you have revenue coming in, you could then go to someone and say, supply us a new shoe, that kind of thing. But basically once you get the audience itself is what you want, that are interested in this, committed to this, and then you grow from there, versus trying to have waiting for a shoe to be created before you launch the business. You see what I mean? So that would be my advice to that.
Well, Dave is a very experienced. It did really well when it was in existence, which is Nike Adventure Club. And his advice to you both is for you to not design a new shoe, but rather do something else, which we heard from, the snippet that we just shared. What do you guys think about that? Is that something that you feel comfortable with, or do you have other thoughts?
I think we have other thoughts. So, I mean, if there was a product out there that we believe that met the needs of our target audience, our target consumer, I think this would probably be sound advice for us. There would be no reason for us to kind of craft a new shoe. We can just focus on better ways to get the shoe that actually met our consumers' needs to them. But unfortunately, or fortunately for us, that shoe doesn't exist. So that gives us an opportunity to kind of create and develop that shoe, while at the same time finding better ways to get that shoe to the consumer. And so we definitely thought about what Dave said, but I think we're confident in our approach to the kids' athletic footwear solution that we're trying to craft.
Yeah, we've heard some different things on this topic. So some people have said things like, you don't want to stand out, you want to look just like what's already out there. And then we've had other people say you need to look really different, you need to really stand out. So I think the way we're currently thinking about it is we want to design something that's different enough that people realize it's a new brand, and maybe it has some different features or benefits, but not so different that they're afraid to try it or they think it looks weird. And something that we've said is, when the first time someone sees our shoe, we want them to kind of notice and be like, I wonder what brand those shoes are. I've never seen that kind of shoe before. The second time, we want them to recognize it and be like, oh, those are the shoes I saw a week ago or 2 weeks ago, whatever it is. And then after that, at some point, either they ask someone and find out what the brand is. Maybe they're doing research online and they figure out what the brand is. But basically, we want it to look different enough where people in the wild are recognizing it and noticing, okay, this is a different shoe than a Nike, an Adidas, a Puma, whatever it is.
Awesome. Well, this has been a great conversation. Thank you guys for your time and for giving us a little bit more insight into what's going on in your heads as you're building this brand and product. So thank you again, and we look forward to hearing more about your journey. Cheers.